How I took my manager's order to follow the dress code. Verbatim, dug out a 1997 handbook, and ended up leading my entire office. Through 2 weeks of polyester suits, sweaty compliance, HR chaos, and the funniest rebellion of my career. When I look back at my years in that office, it's easy to divide the time into before Greg and after Greg. Before Greg, things were easy, predictable. People did their work, went home, and laughed about the copier eating paper or the elevator breaking down again. After Greg, the whole place turned into a bizarre social experiment in polyester and bad policy. But to explain why, you need to understand what before Greg looked like. We were a business casual office, and I don't mean that watered down, HR approved, infographic kind of business casual. I mean the real life, slightly lazy, slightly comfortable version that evolves over years of nobody giving a damn as long as the numbers look good. Mondays, you'd see polos tucked into khakis, sometimes not tucked at all if someone had hit snooze too many times. Tuesdays were cardigan days. By Wednesday, people got creative. Patterned blouses, chinos, loafers without socks. Thursday usually meant someone was testing the waters with sneakers. Friday, if you weren't in jeans, people assumed you had an interview somewhere else. And it worked. Clients never complained. Upper management never cared. Productivity was fine. Morale was good. And nobody fainted from heat stroke because their wardrobe was trying to impersonate the cast of Wall Street. Then Greg arrived. Greg was a transfer from our Denver branch, though rumors said he'd bounced around 3 different offices in as many years. He came with a reputation for being by the book. At first, that sounded harmless, until we learned what book meant. The man treated the employee handbook like it was the 10 Commandments, and he was Moses, coming down from HR Sinai. His first week was a blur of fake smiles, aggressive handshakes, and sentences so full of jargon, you couldn't tell if he was talking about sales projections or an alien invasion. We need to realign our cultural expectations, he'd say, or we're going to tighten our professional presentation to match market realities. None of us knew what that meant, so we just nodded. On Thursday of that first week, at exactly 7:02 a.m., we all got the email. Subject: dress code enforcement, effective immediately from Greg manager team. In order to re-establish a uniformly professional environment, the dress code will be followed verbatim as written in the employee handbook. No exceptions. Please review the handbook today and ensure compliance on Monday. Greg, the word verbatim, was bolded. That was the tell. You learn to read between the lines in corporate emails, and when someone bolds a word like verbatim, they're not making a suggestion. They're daring you to test them. Slack exploded within minutes. Kevin, sales. Bro, what even is the dress code? Linda, accounting. Mine's under 3 years of tax binders. Good luck, John, tech. As long as it doesn't ban hoodies, I'm fine. Sarah, HR. Please refrain from speculation and review the official policy. Guys. That little smiley face from Pal. Sarah told us everything. Even HR didn't want to touch this. I went home that night and dug through my closet, past a pile of old cords, a humidifier I hadn't used in years, and a stack of binders from the early 2000s. There it was, the spiral-bound employee handbook. The cover alone screamed 1997. Our old logo, with the swoosh globe lightning bolt design, someone in marketing must have sworn, looked modern, back when dial-up was cutting edge. The pages smelled like basement. The fonts were the kind Microsoft Word abandoned years ago. And the dress code section, it read like a parody. Men, dress shirt, tie, slacks, and jacket. Women, knee-length skirt, nylons, blouse, and closed-toe shoes. Outerwear, jackets must be worn while seated at one's desk. Prohibited. Polo shirts, khakis, cardigans, denim, athletic shoes. I laughed so loud my neighbor probably thought I was losing it. This wasn't business casual. This was business formal circa Clinton. Administration. Whoever wrote it clearly thought suspenders were still edgy. I texted a picture of the page to Kevin. He responded instantly. Kevin. Oh my god, we're screwed. Then, a few seconds later, Kevin. Or, we go full verbatim. And that's when the spark hit. By Friday afternoon, word had spread. People were rummaging through closets, thrift stores, even their parents' attics, looking for outfits that would satisfy the holy scripture of 1997 corporate chic. Some joked, some complained, but a weird energy was building. If Greg wanted a verbatim dress code, then damn it, he was going to get it. That weekend, I ironed a charcoal suit I hadn't worn since my cousin's wedding. White dress shirt, conservative tie, shiny black shoes, the whole 9 yards. I even packed an emergency stick of antiperspirant labeled 48-hour protection because I had a feeling the office HVAC wasn't ready for 30 people sweating under jackets. In August. When I zipped up the garment bag, the sound was like a lock. Clicking shut, something inside me smiled. Monday morning, the time capsule would open. By Wednesday morning, the office no longer looked like a workplace. It looked like a reunion. For every decade of outdated corporate fashion, people had stopped pretending to be subtle. They were leaning into it, hard. Kevin arrived in suspenders, wide enough to serve as parachute straps, and a paisley tie that could have hypnotized an unsuspecting intern. He tipped his imaginary hat and called me old sport, like he'd just wandered out of The Great Gatsby. Linda one-upped him by breaking out a teal skirt suit with shoulder pads so broad she couldn't fit cleanly through the copy room door. The handbook doesn't specify shoulder width, she announced, marching like a linebacker. Meanwhile, Tom and Sarah from HR had doubled down on nylons. Day 3 in 90-degree heat, she looked like a martyr for bureaucracy. Every time our eyes met across the office, she mouthed, "This is your fault." But it wasn't just them. Jasmine found a vintage blouse with a lace collar, so frilly, it looked like she was auditioning for a Jane Austen remake. Tom wore his wedding suit for the 3rd consecutive day. At that point, the joke had morphed into a nickname, the groom of the copy room. People even started humming the wedding march when he walked by. An intern showed up in a literal 3-piece pinstripe suit, complete with a pocket watch chain, dangling dramatically. "It says jacket, not no vest," he explained, grinning ear to ear. And then came the heat. Our HVAC system had never been great, but suddenly it became the star villain of our little drama. The handbook's rule about jackets staying on while seated turned our cubicles into sweat lodges. Polyester, wool, nylon, every material the human body hates in high temperatures, was now mandatory. By 10 a.m., you could smell the suffering. Deodorant failed. Coffee mingled with body heat. The break room microwave reheated a fish lunch someone had foolishly brought, and the entire floor nearly revolted. People adapted in creative ways. Standing to type became the norm, because the handbook only said jackets must stay on while seated. So the office turned into a forest of human lampposts, everyone hovering awkwardly over their keyboards. Bathroom breaks skyrocketed, not because of hydration, but because the tiled restrooms were 10 degrees cooler. Someone caught Kevin just standing in there, hands on the sink, whispering, "Bless you, AC." At least 3 people quietly brought in handheld fans, disguising them as personal air circulators. By lunchtime, the absurdity reached peak. Theatre. A group of us, fully suited, staged a procession to the vending machine. 30-odd degrees outside, 80 inside, ties clinging to our necks. We marched in unison like pallbearers. Greg walked in mid-procession. He froze, eyes darting from suspenders to nylons to pocket watch. His lips parted, then closed. Without a word, he turned and retreated to his office. That afternoon, Slack was pure chaos. Kevin. Jackets on =sign civilization. Jackets off =sign anarchy. Linda. If I faint at my desk, is that PTO? Jasmine. HR says hostile work environment is real. Who's filing the class action? Sarah. HR. Do not joke about class actions. By Thursday, the complaints had officially overwhelmed HR. People filed tickets citing unsafe working conditions, risk of dehydration, and psychological distress caused by mandated nylons. Sarah was on the phone non-stop, muttering things like, "No, OSHA does not regulate hosiery." The best moment came that afternoon. When a client visited, he stepped into the lobby and nearly tripped over his words. "Is there a conference or some kind of themed day?" Our receptionist, dressed in a blouse that looked like it belonged to her grandmother, just smiled sweetly and said, "Handbook, compliance." The client nodded very slowly, like he was afraid to set off a cult. By Friday morning, the entire floor was delirious. People staggered around in suits and skirts, sleeves sticking, collars limp, nylon shiny with heat. We weren't just employees anymore. We were actors in the world's least glamorous historical reenactment. Greg came out of his office to address us mid-morning. He adjusted his tie, which had quietly slipped loose at least 3 times that week, and smiled with all the confidence of a man who had lost the room. "I appreciate everyone's dedication to professionalism," he said, voice thin. "Clients notice when we hold ourselves to a higher standard." Behind him, Tom fainted. Okay, faint might be an exaggeration, but he did slump dramatically against the cubicle wall, muttering, "I do." The timing was so perfect that Kevin actually whispered, "You may now kiss the bride." Greg cleared his throat and retreated, face flushed. By the end of the week, HR's inbox was a battlefield, and the word verbatim had become a curse. We had complied to the letter, and the letter was strangling us all. But the best was yet to come. By Monday of the 2nd week, the joke had outgrown us. It wasn't just a few sarcastic Slack messages or the occasional ironic bow tie. It had metastasized into a movement, and HR was drowning. Every morning, Sarah would arrive with her hair already frizzed from stress, clutching a stack of printed complaints thick enough to double as a doorstop. Her nylons, once immaculate, now had tiny runs in them from the daily battle against reality. By 9:15, she'd vanish into her office and re-emerge looking like she'd aged 5 years. The complaints were piling up faster than they could be closed. Hostile work environment, citing temperatures over 80 degrees Fahrenheit in cubicles, exacerbated by mandatory jackets, unsafe conditions, dehydration, dizziness, and in one case, a rash attributed to nylon stockings in August heat. Discrimination. At least 2 men claimed they should be allowed to wear breathable kilts, since skirts were technically permissible for women. Emotional distress. One employee attached a photo of themselves, drenched in sweat, with the caption, "Do I look professional to you?" HR tried to downplay it at first. "Please use common sense," Sarah whispered to me at the coffee machine. "Don't take the jacket rule so literally," Greg said, verbatim. I replied, smiling. Her jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. Meanwhile, employees were doubling down. Kevin came in with cufflinks shaped like tiny skulls. "Handbook doesn't say they can't be fun," he explained. Linda rotated through 4 different suits, each one more aggressively 90s than the last. And Tom, the groom of the copy room, had started bringing in rice crackers and champagne-flavored sparkling water for his reception. Whenever anyone walked by, he'd toast them with a solemn, "To love, honor, and HR violations." The heat was unbearable. Jackets clung like straitjackets. Ties stuck like nooses. People kept slipping out to the stairwell for air breaks. One guy actually brought in a desk fan, the size of a small jet engine. HR told him it was disruptive, so he started pointing it directly at Greg's office door whenever it opened. Clients were noticing too. A visiting partner from Chicago walked into the lobby on Tuesday, saw a row of us lined up in full funeral attire, and whispered, "Are we interrupting a wake?" Our receptionist, bless her, simply nodded. By Wednesday, Sarah snapped. She stormed into the open office floor, holding a manila folder stuffed with complaints. "This is unsustainable," she announced. "HR is not equipped to deal with whatever this is." Kevin raised his hand. "With respect, Sarah, this is called compliance." The room erupted in stifled laughter. Sarah's face flushed crimson. "I don't care what it's called. People are threatening legal action." "Legal? Over nylons," Linda chimed in, voice calm but deadly. "Hostile work environment is legally actionable, Sarah. OSHA regulates temperature. You might want to check the guidelines." Sarah blinked at her like she'd just been shot. "I hate all of you," she muttered, retreating back into her office. That afternoon, Greg finally emerged. His jacket was immaculate, tie perfectly straight, though I noticed a bead of sweat trailing down his temple. He clapped his hands together. "Team," he said brightly, "I just want to commend everyone for their commitment to professionalism. Our clients have noticed. Morale is high. Productivity is..." "Morale is what?" Jasmine called out, fanning herself with a legal pad. "Half of us are Googling symptoms of heat stroke." Greg's smile faltered. Kevin adjusted his suspenders with theatrical flair. "We're only following the handbook, Greg." Verbatim. That word again. Like a whip crack. You could see the twitch in his jaw every time it was said. He tried to rally. "Discomfort is temporary. Professionalism is permanent." Tom, bless him, muttered, "So is heat stroke." The laughter was brutal. By Thursday, the situation had escalated beyond farce. HR escalated the complaints to regional headquarters. Regional called corporate. Corporate called back and asked the obvious. Why the hell are people wearing nylons? And in August, Greg's name was suddenly attached to a string of urgent emails with subject lines like employee safety concern and clarification required. Dress code enforcement. We could smell blood. On Friday morning, an anonymous flyer appeared taped to the break room fridge. It had a picture of a sweating man in a suit and the words, "Hostile work environment. When your jacket is a prison." Greg ripped it down, face scarlet. But by lunch, 10 more had popped up. That afternoon, Sarah marched into his office with a stack of papers and slammed them on his desk. "Fix this," she said. "We heard it from outside because the walls were paper thin. Either you fix this or corporate will." For the first time, Greg didn't have a quick smile or a motivational slogan. He just sat there, jaw tight, staring at the pile of complaints like it was a coffin lid. The tide was turning. Monday morning, 8:27 a.m., the elevator dinged, and I stepped out into the 4th floor, looking like I was headed to either a funeral or a courtroom drama. Charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, tie knotted with the kind of precision you only manage when you Google how to tie a Windsor at midnight, and shoes polished enough to blind the intern making coffee. The reaction was immediate. "Whoa," said Jasmine from client services, nearly spilling her latte. "Big interview today?" "Court data," added John from IT, spinning around in his chair to gawk. "Nope," I said, holding up the spiral-bound handbook like it was holy scripture. "Just following policy. Verbatim." That word landed like a firecracker. Half the office burst into laughter. The other half started nervously opening desk drawers, clearly wondering what exactly the handbook said, and whether they were about to be next in line for Greg's crusade. Then Kevin walked in. Kevin had gone full performance art, double-breasted, navy suit with wide lapels, bright red suspenders, visible whenever he moved, and a tie patterned with tiny golden anchors. He looked like he had either stepped out of a 1920s stock exchange or was about to sing "You Got Trouble" from the Musics. Man, he grinned like the Cheshire Cat. What? Handbook says jacket. Doesn't say anything about not looking like I'm running for mayor in 1948. By 9 o'clock, the floor had transformed into a bizarre time capsule. Linda from accounting wore a skirt suit with shoulder pads so sharp she could have doubled as an aircraft. She claimed she found it in the back of her closet, untouched since the first Bush administration. Sarah from HR showed up in nylons in August and spent the morning glaring at me like I was personally responsible for global warming. Tom, poor Tom, only owned one suit, his wedding suit. He wore it proudly day one. By lunch, he'd already admitted he planned to just rotate shirts and pray no one noticed. Spoiler, we noticed. By Wednesday, we were calling him the groom of the copy room. Even interns got in on the act. One girl showed up with a bow tie, claiming, "Hey, handbook doesn't forbid it." And here was the kicker. Jackets had to stay on while seated. The handbook wasn't vague about that. Jackets on at your desk, no exceptions. Which meant we now had 30 people sweating through polyester while trying to answer phones, type reports, and not keel over. You'd see folks casually stand to stretch and then spend 10 minutes typing while upright, just so they could peel the jacket open a bit. Others sneaked into the bathroom and held their arms out under the hand dryer on the cool setting. By mid-morning, the office reeked of starch, deodorant, and regret. At 10:15 sharp, Greg arrived for his victory lap. He moved down the rows, smiling like a proud drill sergeant, inspecting his troops. "Looking sharp," he said to Tom, who looked like a man preparing to file for annulment. "That's what professionalism looks like." "Absolutely," I chimed in, dabbing sweat from my forehead with a napkin. "Just following the handbook, verbatim." His smile twitched, just a little. But the best part was the Slack chat. Kevin, jackets must be worn while seated. Page 47. Linda, I'm filing for heat exhaustion. Is that billable? John, typing standing up now. Call me Vertical Solutions. Architect, Sarah, HR. This is not funny. By lunch, things reached peak absurdity. A group of us staged a jacket-clad procession to the vending machine. Picture it. 5 grown adults in stiff suits, ties knotted, heels clacking, all sweating buckets, as we debated Funyuns versus Doritos. When Greg walked in and saw us, the look on his face was priceless. He had wanted professionalism. What he got was a funeral for common sense. The week only escalated. By Tuesday, people had raided thrift stores, suspenders, vintage ties, pencil skirts in pastel colors that hadn't seen the light of day since Y2K. One guy even brought in a fedora. "The handbook says jacket, not no hat," he declared, tipping it like a noir detective. By Wednesday, the office resembled a 90s office supply catalog photo shoot. Stiff blouses, shiny suits, nylons squeaking under desks. Clients visiting that day did double takes in the lobby, whispering, "Is there a conference or a costume party?" And the heat, unbearable. The HVAC seemed to mock us, blowing cold air in random patches and leaving half the office to roast. HR got flooded with complaints about hostile working conditions. One employee actually submitted a temperature log showing their cubicle at 81 degrees Fahrenheit. The revolt was subtle but unstoppable. People weren't just complying, they were complying so hard that it made the rule itself look absurd. By Thursday, even, Greg had started loosening his tie when he thought no one was looking. But every time his door opened, 30 pairs of eyes darted to him like hawks. The moment he saw, he straightened, tugged the knot up, and pretended nothing happened. By Friday, the joke had burned itself into legend. People were calling the break room the boardroom. Standing-only meetings became a thing, and someone had taped a copy of the dress code page to the fridge with the word verbatim underlined in red. Greg wanted order. What he got was an office-wide comedy of compliance. And we weren't done yet. By the time the second week rolled around, it was clear Greg was running out of steam. HR had been buried under complaints. Corporate had already started sniffing around, and the floor looked less like an office and more like a costume archive. Everyone was sweaty, half delirious, and completely united in their mission to follow the rules exactly as written and to make Greg regret the word verbatim. Then, on Tuesday morning, a new memo appeared, pinned to the bulletin board. It had Greg's name on it, in his usual overly tidy font. But this one had a tone that practically screamed defeat. The subject line read, "Temporary climate exception." The message inside was 3 bullet points long. Due to the ongoing heat advisory, Employees may remove jackets at 30-minute intervals while at their desks. Ties must remain presentable, but the knot should not restrict healthy breathing. Nylons are considered personal choice until further notice. At the very bottom, in bold italics, was the line that would doom him. Please interpret the dress code, not only to the letter, but in the spirit of professionalism. That was it. That was the crack in the dam. He thought he was tossing us a lifeline. In reality, he had just handed us the funniest loophole in corporate history. We had been trapped in polyester purgatory for over a week. Now he was telling us the spirit mattered. We decided to take that word literally. If verbatim meant strangling ourselves with ties in August, then spirit meant something else entirely. It meant creativity. It meant mockery. It meant turning the office into a pageant of outdated fashion with a wink and a grin. By lunch, Kevin had already declared the start of Spirit of the Policy Week. He announced it to the entire floor with the confidence of a ringmaster. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades and co-workers, starting tomorrow, we will honor the spirit of professionalism by dressing in the spirit of each decade. Tuesday will remain in survival mode. Wednesday, the 1980s. Thursday, the 1970s. Friday, casual Friday, but we're going to do it like it's 1997 all over again. Slack lit up like fireworks. Jasmine. So we're time traveling now. Kevin. Spirit traveling. Verbatim in the afterlife. Linda. I have 4 power suits that will block out the sun. Consider yourselves warned. Tom, aka the groom. I'll bring champagne flutes to honor the spirit of matrimony. That night, people raided closets, thrift stores, and even their parents' attics. What Greg had unleashed was no longer compliance. It was theater. Wednesday morning, the 1980s came crashing into the 21st century. Linda's shoulder pads could have safely landed a small aircraft. Jasmine had teased her hair into a gravity-defying ponytail with a scrunchie the size of a fist. Sarah from HR arrived in a grey pencil skirt and, shockingly, without nylons. When someone raised an eyebrow, she glared and snapped, "Personal choice," before stomping off in pumps that clacked like gunfire. Even I joined in, wearing a wide tie in a hideous geometric pattern I found buried in a thrift shop bargain bin. Kevin went full Don Draper meets Miami Vice, with pastel suspenders and mirrored aviators. The effect was instantaneous. The office no longer resembled a functioning workplace. It looked like an abandoned set from Working Girl, mixed with a garage sale. But technically, still professional. Still suits. Still ties. Still skirts. Still jackets. The spirit was alive. A client came in that morning and nearly tripped over his words at the reception desk. He looked at the rows of padded shoulders and shiny blouses and asked, "Is there a theme today?" Our receptionist, deadpan as ever, said, "We are interpreting the spirit of the policy." The client nodded slowly, like he had just stumbled into a cult. Meanwhile, the 30-minute jacket rule created its own comedy. Every half hour on the dot, the entire floor would pause, stand up, and peel jackets off in unison. 30 minutes later, the same wave of motion swept across the cubicles as everyone dutifully shrugged them back on. It became a ritual, a shared joke we could all cling to. To Greg, it must have looked like mass insubordination, disguised as choreography. By Thursday, the spirit had shifted to the 1970s. Polyester exploded across the office in a way no HVAC system could handle. Kevin showed up in a mustard yellow suit, so bright it nearly triggered migraines. Linda found a skirt with a plaid pattern that could have doubled as a picnic blanket. One intern wore bell-bottoms, which technically weren't slacks, but no one could find the word bell-bottom in the handbook. When Greg glared at him, the kid shrugged and said, "Slacks are slacks, right?" Even HR had given up. Sarah looked defeated, sipping iced coffee while muttering, "This is above my pay grade." She no longer tried to stop us. Instead, she kept a running log of the complaints she was forwarding to corporate. Employee fainted during polyester compliance ritual. Jacket metronome causing psychological distress. Client believes we are participating in a reenactment society. By Friday, Spirit Week reached its crescendo. The theme was 1997, Casual Friday. To honor the year the handbook was written, people came in with denim shirts, tucked into pleated khakis, loafers without socks, silk ties with loud patterns, and even pages clipped to belts. Kevin brought in a Palm Pilot he found on eBay and pretended to check his calendar every 15 minutes. Someone set their ringtone to a dial-up modem. Noise. Greg looked like a man on the verge of collapse. He'd been watching this circus unfold all week, his face turning redder by the day. His carefully crafted memos had been turned into performance art. His word verbatim had been used to drag us back into a heatwave nightmare. And now his word spirit was being used to justify neon suspenders and platform shoes. He tried to rally. Once, mid-morning on Friday, he stepped out of his office, straightened his tie and said, "Team, let's not lose sight of professionalism. The spirit of the policy is not to make a mockery of workplace standards. It is to ensure we present ourselves appropriately to clients. Kevin adjusted his oversized sunglasses and replied, "Exactly, Greg. That's why we're living the spirit. Bold, timeless, professional. Like it's 1997 forever." The room erupted in laughter. Even Sarah from HR cracked a smile. By the end of the week, corporate had clearly had enough. Sarah received an email with the subject line, "Dress code clarification. Final." The body was short and sweet. Employees are expected to dress in modern business casual attire. Jackets are optional. Use common sense. That was it. 3 sentences, and the entire saga was undone. On Monday, the polos came back. The khakis returned. Cardigans emerged like old friends. The nylons were shoved back into drawers, never to be spoken of again. Tom retired his wedding suit. Linda finally lowered her shoulders back into the 21st century. And Greg, he never mentioned the handbook again, not once. He avoided eye contact whenever someone said the word verbatim. He practically flinched at spirit. He wore his tie a little looser after that, and sometimes even risked showing up without a jacket. He had been broken by his own insistence on the letter of the law. For us though, the memory lingered. Whenever summer rolled around and the AC sputtered, someone would whisper, "Remember when jackets were mandatory?" And we'd all laugh until our sides hurt. Because, in the end, that was the true spirit of the policy. Not looking sharp, not impressing clients, but reminding ourselves that if you push people too hard, they'll find a way to turn compliance into comedy. And if you're unlucky enough to be the manager who started it, you'll never live it down. The Monday after corporate's final memo, the office looked like a battlefield after the smoke cleared. Not in the literal sense. No broken desks, no overturned coffee pots, but in the way people moved. Shoulders relaxed. Jackets stayed off without fear. Polos blossomed across the floor, like flowers pushing through asphalt. Cardigans hung off chairs again. You could almost hear a collective exhale as everyone slipped back into normal. It was eerie at first. We'd spent 2 full weeks marching through polyester purgatory, sweating in synchronized 30-minute jacket rituals, and competing to outdo each other's shoulder pads. Now, suddenly, the performance was over. The costumes had been packed away. People showed up in sensible slacks and breathable fabrics, blinking in the fluorescent lights like actors. After a final curtain call, Greg, however, looked like he hadn't slept since 1997. He shuffled into the office on Monday in what was clearly the same navy suit he'd worn since his first day, but something about it said. His tie was crooked, his hair had lost its precise parting. For the first time, he looked human and very, very tired. He gave a limp smile and muttered, "Good morning, team," before retreating into his office, like a man hoping no one would mention jackets ever again. Nobody did. Not directly, but small reminders haunted him. On Tuesday, Kevin accidentally left a copy of the handbook open on the break room table, highlighting the line about jackets at desks. Greg walked in, saw it, and immediately walked out again. Without saying a word. On Wednesday, Linda placed her teal shoulder pad blazer on the back of her chair. Just the blazer, like a scarecrow of professionalism. She never wore it, just let it loom there as a reminder. On Thursday, Tom left a single champagne flute by the copier, a farewell gift from the groom of the copy room. When Greg asked who it belonged to, Tom deadpanned, "It's ceremonial, for the spirit of matrimony and compliance." Greg's sigh could have powered the HVAC. And by Friday, Sarah from HR finally snapped the last piece of his pride. She delivered a mandatory HR presentation titled Practical Professionalism Lessons Learned. We all gathered in the conference room, expecting the usual PowerPoint on harassment policies or cybersecurity, but the second slide read, "Case study, over-enforcement of outdated dress codes," and the background photo, a stock image of an exhausted man in a 3-piece suit, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. The resemblance to Greg was uncanny. Sarah didn't say his name once. She didn't need to. The presentation outlined best practices, like consult HR before strict enforcement, and consider employee comfort when interpreting legacy policies. Every bullet point was a subtle jab at the 2 weeks we'd all lived through. People chuckled, coughed to cover laughter, and Greg sat in the back, staring straight ahead like he was trying to astral project into another dimension. After that meeting, the saga was officially over. Corporate closed the complaint files. HR updated the handbook with 3 short paragraphs. Dress appropriately for your role and responsibilities. Use common sense. Jackets optional. That was it. No mention of nylons. No mention of ties. No mention of 30-minute intervals. The era of verbatim had died a swift and merciful death. The long winter of Greg. For a while, Greg tried to reassert authority. He threw himself into metrics, held weekly alignment huddles, and sent long emails about strategic posture. But the damage was done. He had shown us his hand. Every time he used a dramatic word, alignment, synergy, holistic. You could see people fighting back smirks, remembering verbatim and spirit. Once, during a quarterly meeting, he said, "We must follow the letter and the spirit of our new strategy." Half the room burst out laughing before catching themselves. He went beet red. After that, he avoided those two words entirely, like they were cursed. His reputation never fully recovered. To corporate, he was just another manager. To us, he was the man who made 30 adults sweat in funeral suits in August because he couldn't leave well enough alone. The legacy months later, whenever summer heat returned and the AC sputtered, someone would inevitably whisper, "Remember, jacket season." Laughter would ripple across the floor. It became part of our lore, alongside the time the copier caught fire, or the time someone brought a goat to the holiday party. Don't ask. New hires eventually came in, and the story got passed down like an office ghost tale. See that guy? He once told us to follow the dress code verbatim. The handbook was from 1997. We all looked like extras in Wall Street for 2 weeks. HR almost called OSHA. The new hires would laugh, wide-eyed, not quite believing it, until someone dug out a photo. Yes, there were photos. Kevin had secretly documented everything. There were shots of Linda's shoulder pads, Tom with his champagne flute, and the entire floor mid-ritual, shrugging jackets on, in perfect unison. Greg hated that those photos existed. He couldn't erase them though. They were proof, living, history. They were, in a strange way, the one thing that truly unified our team. Epilogue. Eventually, Greg transferred again, this time to another branch, rumored to be somewhere colder. We joked that he'd finally found a place where jackets were practical. Nobody missed him when he left, though we all silently thanked him for the gift he'd given us. 2 weeks of absurdity, rebellion, and the sweetest kind of victory. Because the truth was simple. He tried to force us into a box, and we turned that box into a stage. He gave us verbatim, we gave him theatre. He gave us spirit, we gave him satire. And in the end, we won. Not by breaking the rules, but by following them so precisely that the rules broke themselves. Whenever I think back on that time, I don't remember the sweat or the itchy fabric. I remember the laughter, the whispered jokes, the synchronized jacket movements, the way even HR gave up trying to contain us. I remember how, for 2 weeks, compliance became camaraderie. And I remember Greg's face, red with frustration, as Kevin tipped his hat and declared, "To the letter, boss." To the very last letter. That was the day we learned the most important lesson of corporate life. When management insists on the letter of the law, sometimes the best protest is to take them at their word. And if you do it right, you'll never have to wear a suit in August again.